Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and welcome to this month's Chamber One-on-One. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so we'll dive right in, but I did want to mention a big thank you to our sponsor, CenterPoint Energy, for being the sponsor of this series, and always appreciate their support. I'm honored to be joined today by Pearland Mayor Kevin Cole. Mayor Cole was sworn in as the mayor of the city of Pearland on November 17th of 2020. Prior to becoming mayor, he had a combined 9 years of service on city council with notable accomplishments with things like securing the 2007 bond program election, the Cowards Creek diversion project, and strategic policy decisions that have spurred development of the lower Kirby district. He's also served as a commissioner on the city's Planning and Zoning Commission. In addition to his years of public service, he served on various committees and boards in local economic development. In his professional career, he spent more than 20 years in developing real estate, currently serving as the principal for Cove Matrix Development. Over his career, he's assisted in developing and consulting on more than 6,500 residential lots, resulting in $1.7 billion of capital investment. Been a Pearland resident for 44 years, a graduate of Pearland High School and Texas Tech University, where he received his bachelor's in marketing and a minor in public relations. He and his wife, Lisa, have 4 children and 10 grandchildren. Please welcome Pearland Mayor Kevin Cole. Mayor, great to see you, sir.
Great to see you, Brian, and thank you for the introduction there. In fact, I need to update my resume with one number. We found out that we've got number 11 that will be due in September. So our family just continues to grow, and it's wonderful having all of our grandkids and our kids nearby. So that's one thing I guess I need to go to communications and say, okay, it's time to tweak it.
That's a pretty great update. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And a great way to kick off the conversation. You know, we wanted to have this opportunity to get to learn a little bit about you and your background and some of the things and experiences that might have shaped you and your leadership style as mayor. Maybe I'll just hand it over to you, Mayor, to talk a little bit about your history and work you've done in the community.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. As mentioned in my bio, 9 years of experience on our city council, dating back to the mid 90s, in really when the growth of the city was just about to ready to go to lift off. I mean, I know you're in the Clear Lake area, so we'll use a space term. And literally, our growth, when the Beltway was completed in 96, you can go back and look at single family building permits, and they just skyrocketed from then till now. And so served in that and the fast pace of our work, and then came back to council in 04 through 2010. I think we met every single Monday night in dealing with infrastructure and all of those kind of things in an attempt to keep up with the growth so we didn't get too far behind. And that just really kind of shaped kind of who I am today and the experiences. I get the opportunity, even with our council today, to talk about some of that experience, to talk about some of the projects. I've got a historical view on how a lot of things have come about here in town. So it's been good to be able to use that experience. And as mentioned, just in the development business alone, developing single family residential neighborhoods and those types of things, I have an experience with what it means on the private side to deploy capital, go through permitting, go through entitlement work, and then eventually bringing something out of the ground that you can be proud of. And so like to use that from a strategic standpoint. As a person, and probably my biggest strong point in who I am and my personality would be strategic planning. Looking out into the future and say, where do we want to go? And then coming up with the steps to get there. Naturally, you got to start somewhere, but you got to start with a plan. And the city of Pearland has been busy planning for many, many years to get to the point where we are today. And now we're moving that needle and moving our planning to where we want to be in the next 10 years, next 15 years. And it's a different look as a city than what we've been doing. We've been trying to keep up with this massive growth. And now we need to start planning and understanding when we don't have this massive growth any longer, what do we look like as a maintenance driven city as opposed to a high growth city.
Yeah, that's a great point and a great skill set you bring to that job in a time of transition. And to that point, you've been in the mayor's role since November of 2020. The first time we met, I sort of casually asked, so what are your big rocks? What are the big things you're looking at, and what are the things going on? And you immediately, without skipping a beat, probably listed off 5 or 10 big things you were working. Do you mind sharing some of those? What the big things you're focused on? I know growth and the transition of the community, but what are any individual projects that are kind of top of mind right now?
Yeah, there's several things. Obviously, from an infrastructure standpoint, we will always have our capital improvements program. We're still playing catch up when, in some ways, we've got some older, outdated water and sewer, type of infrastructure that needs to be not only updated or replaced. So those are big capital intense projects. We have the largest single capital project that the city is ever dealt with under construction right now. It's a water treatment facility on our west end of town, $165 million project. We are like anybody else. We're hamstrung by supply chain issues. So we're hopefully we'll deliver that project probably in the first quarter of next year, about this time ish next year. And so pulling water out of the American Canal out there and feeding our city. So just wrapping your arms around some of these big infrastructure projects. Another thing is just continuing to grow our economy and jobs. I tell people all the time, one of my goals in this position, if I could give you as a citizen to our community 320 hours of your life back every single year, what would that mean to you? And of course, immediately people are like, well, that would be awesome, but how are you going to do that? And if we can grow the right types of companies, the right types of jobs into our community, and give people a 15-minute commute versus 45, that's 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night, and you've just given somebody an hour of their life back. Now that's 320 hours over the course of the year. They can spend with their family. They can go back to school. They can get involved with scouts. They can get involved in the community. They can get involved in boards and commissions. They could sleep, whatever the case is for them. It's a quality of life issue. So growing jobs in our community and the right paying jobs is a quality of life issue at the end of the day. And so anything we can do to do that, we want to help. We're continuing to add companies to our list. We had a major announcement last week with a new company that is moving into our community, and so we want to continue to do that. Along those same lines, how do we grow our economy and grow the amenities that people want? Just mentioning a little bit ago, there's a desire to have a indoor sports facility. We see people all the time that leave our community for volleyball, basketball, and the like. These AAU teams, these select teams, and we've got those all over our community. And those folks leave our community because there's not enough space to practice. There's not enough space for tournaments and those types of things. And so we're looking at how do we do that? How do we do it responsibly? How do we pay for that so it's not a drag on our infrastructure, let alone a drag on our general fund where we pay, police and fire and streets and drainage and those types of things. And so how do we do it and do it the right way so people can be proud of it and it not be a burden on the taxpayer? Those are some things that we're looking at, working heavily on. I took a bus trip yesterday to Round Rock to see a facility that's now about 8 years old. How is it working out for their community? How do they keep it alive? And literally they have tournaments in that facility 45 out of 52 weekends a year. And we can do the same thing here and drive the economy at the same time. So always wanting to look at how we do that. From a development standpoint, we want to be and continue to be business friendly. This is where, as a developer in the private sector, can utilize my experience and others on council and their experience on how do we streamline, how do we perfect, or how do we get better at that at the same time, not giving up the quality that we want to see in our city. And so there's ways of doing that and making sure staff is doing what they need to do to push and get permits on the out and going. I want to see people deploy their capital as soon as possible in our community. And if it takes months and months and months to get their permits, that's going to eventually catch up with us where people don't want to bring their dollars here. So all of that kind of working together with our staff. And I'll say this, probably the one of the highlight of the last 18 months for me, it's allowing and going back and using my skill set from a strategic planning side. Prior to coming in as mayor, I'd kind of seen where staff was in some ways kind of leading discussions on where we're headed, and council was kind of following that. And so realigned that last year. We had our first strategic planning initiative and really put council in that driver's seat. Where do we want to go as a community? Where do we want to go as a council? And drove our strategic planning and our strategic initiatives. And then we had a second of those just here a few months ago. And this year was actually better than last year. Last year was kind of breaking the mold and breaking the ground. And this year really clarified a lot of where council wanted to take things. And I think that's the right alignment for our community. It really gets council buy-in with staff and working together. At the end of the day, it's not council versus staff versus citizens. It's a team all working together to move and direct our community in the right direction.
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you for that. You know, one of the things that I've been thinking about, and I think you've been a terrific leader for Pearland, one of the biggest challenges in leadership is following a beloved incumbent in the previous mayor, who was very highly respected and in that job for a long time. And by all measures, you've hit the ground running and been remarkably successful in your first 18 months. Can you talk a little bit about your mentality, how you approached that, how you've sort of been operating in that environment?
Yeah. So, and in the middle of me talking, I'm actually going to grab something off of my desk. But at the end of the day, when you have a Tom Reed, who is an icon, not only in our city, but in our region and in our state, as mayor, and you're going to take over. You know, I had people saying, why would you want to take over from that? That's a risk. Instead of thinking of it as a risk, I looked at it as an opportunity to embrace the legacy that a Tom Reed actually did. I had people for a whole year as I was running for office say, how do you fill his shoes? And so I told people, I said, you don't. You set his shoes aside and you put your own shoes on, and you fill your own shoes, and you set your own path, and you set your own legacy. At the same time, recognize, respect, and honor the legacy that is Tom Reed. So today, in fact, he's in the office today. He is listed as Mayor Emeritus here at our city. He has his parking space. We have an office set up for him. And we give him something to do in his later years in life. And so that's a way to honor him. It grounds me. It gives me the opportunity to see somebody that I adore, I love. I think of him as a father figure to me. And it gives me that opportunity to have one-on-ones with him. And so I went so far, and I'm gonna show you this. Went so far. So after elected, I asked him if I could have a pair of his shoes, and he was puzzled by it. And I said, no, I really want, every guy has that pair of shoes that's in the back of their closet that they should have thrown away, 10 years ago. But they have. And he brought them to me in a bag, in a box, and I took them out and had them bronzed. And yeah, it says Mayor Tom Reed, shoes I will not fill. And this sits on my desk. It's the first thing you see. It's literally the first thing that you see when you come into my office. And it's a great conversation piece. You can see by the detail, these are worn. He wore penny loafers forever. And this is a part of him that I'll have forever. But it reminds me every day, I am not Tom Reed. And it reminds people when they come in that I'm not Tom Reed. But I'm going to honor him and his legacy. And so oftentimes I'll sit and think, okay, what would Mayor Reed do here? How would I react to that? At the same time, I am my own person. I am my own personality. I run meetings differently than he does, and have set the direction and the leadership, the direction I want it to go. But you got to honor that. You don't shove or push or set aside. You honor, respect, and keep alive him and his legacy.
Yeah, that's a fantastic insight, and what a great way to recognize all his contributions. That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things, Mayor, that we've spoken a little bit about, or you've mentioned a little bit, is the tremendous growth in Pearland. Mayor Reed certainly was in the mayor's role for a large part of that, and you now are part of that too. And it you know, although you mentioned sort of thinking through when there's not as much opportunity to develop, that's still a ways out. There is a ton going on. Any lessons learned from all that development and all that growth, things you think are things for other communities to take away, things for them not to do? What have been some of your big lessons learned through this process?
Yeah, you know, you learn as you go, right? And in this business, you learn and you develop, and then you learn, you know, action items and lessons learned along the way. And one of the things that for me that we've learned is really you cannot set aside planning. You can't set aside comprehensive planning in your community, really understanding who, what, and where you want to go as a community, bringing the citizens along for that. And so from a master planned approach, even though I guess Shadow Creek Ranch and Silver Lake would be considered, you know, two large master plan communities within Pearland, you know, if we could have had the opportunity to do more, that would have been better for our community in the long run. So I tell members of council and mayors and others in Brazoria County to the south, because all of this growth is moving south down the 288 corridor. So I tell them all the time, by all means, come and learn from what we did, being the first to go through it. Learn what we did right and feel free to copy it. Learn what we did wrong and please learn from it. And perfect and do a better job. And so, you know, I by all means want to help our communities around us, because we all live around Brazoria County and Harris County, Fort Bend County, Galveston County, and we want to learn from each other so we can learn what better to do. We're just in a situation now where we've got one last, I guess, large area yet to develop. It's about 1,000 acres. It's under development as we speak. We have other developers that want to look at the area. And so we only have one opportunity to get it right, and we need to get it right now in how we plan it. Beyond that, we're going to start getting into more infill type tracks, 10 acres, 15 acres, 20 acre type things. And so council, one of our initiatives is how do we really maximize the value that's on that ground? And how do we do it? Because once it's built, it'll be there for a generation or two. And so you've got to make sure that you get the best value on the ground at the same time, high quality value that people can be proud of in their community. So a mix of products, which we're looking at different product mix from a housing standpoint. How do we do that? And again, drive value and drive quality at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great mentality. And I think from an economic development standpoint, you all have done it just right. I mean, making sure that the growth is planned and strategic and thoughtful, and instead of just sprawl, you know, and that, you know, whoever buys it and just develops whatever, having some mindset to it. You know, one of the things in the greater Clear Lake region that we're watching is that on a transportation type activity, both in the expansion and ongoing improvements on I-45, but also the Grand Parkway coming through. And you know, contributing to that. And there's a lot of that going on. Any words of wisdom for the teams that are working on those projects and how to maximize that and kind of have that same methodical thought process that you all have had with a lot of your development?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I served on the Greater 288 Partnership, helped found that organization back in 2010 to push for 288. And as you see, you know, 288's been built, and ultimately there'll be additional sections that'll be built along the way as it moves south. And so, you know, the experience going through that is invaluable to me as a mayor, but I'm actually on a transportation committee with Baytran, and specifically we want to highlight the Grand Parkway as it links Brazoria County to Galveston County, and then ultimately with segment C over into Fort Bend County. And how do we position ourselves to make sure that we keep that on the radar? And so I'm actually working on that with them. How do we highlight the Bay Area? In fact, when you start talking about Clear Lake in that area, and you start talking about the Bay Area cities and everything else, working through Baytran as well as the mayors in BayHep, and how do we bring all the parties together necessary to highlight that area and do for what we need in the Bay Area from a transportation standpoint. So I'll share this with your membership, maybe let a little bit of the cat out of the bag. So I mentioned to Bob Mitchell at BayHep here a month and a half ago. We've got BayHep, we have the Economic Development Alliance, you've got the port, you got Baytran, and you got the cities and the counties all coming together. And I said, you've got a economic engine in the middle of that that makes up about 27% of the state's GDP. And so let me say that one more time. The state's GDP is the 9th largest economy on the planet. 9th largest economy on the planet. And in a 50 or 70 square mile area over here, you have 27% of the 9th largest economy in the world right here. So how do we leverage that with the proper people to get the funding and to get the highlight, if you will, to make sure that we do that right? And so called on Bob Mitchell and Baytran and the Alliance to come together and put together a Gulf Coast Transportation Summit, bring the parties necessary. We're going to target the governor to come in as a keynote speaker, because the governor's out here telling people all the time, bring your ships to Texas. And we want those ships to come to Texas. But we don't want to be Long Beach. And all of a sudden we're clogged and goods can't get into the port and out. And so let's highlight the fact that we're the 27th largest or 27% of the state's GDP. And let's leverage that all the way up to the governor to get the funding necessary to unlock these transportation needs. Grand Parkway would be one, I-45 would be one, 225 would be one, and then obviously smaller arteries between. So that's to come. I think they're having a planning meeting today, trying to set some dates into the fall, and how do we do that? So obviously the Clear Lake Chamber and all the other chambers are going to be integral in filling that up. It's an opportunity to lobby, if you will. Lobbying is not a bad word. Each one of us do it every day when we talk to our elected officials. And so we want to have that conversation with them. Obviously, we need to go to Austin in the legislative session and ask and make the ask to get the necessary transportation dollars here. So using that experience, I've told the folks, everybody will tell you they're in favor of it. And this is a lesson learned on 288. But there's always a landmine. There always will be. And so somehow you have to detect and uncover the landmine and figure out who's going to be your roadblock. And once you figure that out, then you can develop a plan around how you strategically work around that landmine or through that landmine or remove that landmine or whatever the case may be. And you ultimately do. And we did that with 288 and realized who and where the landmine was. And once we realized it, we were able to go around it, and things happened very, very quickly once we did that.
Yeah, thank you for that insight. And I think we in the business community and our members have a level of advocacy that we need to be doing on behalf of all of this, because it's our community. And so glad to hear you say that, and look forward to be engaged on the chamber, and also really appreciate your regional mentality on all of it. I mean, just getting the team together. I know BayHep plays a big part in that. I know that there are a number of other players that are part of that, but everybody being having some accountability and making it in the same way we advocate for the aerospace community or the chemicals and commodities community. That responsible transportation and making sure that we do that right is really important. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, and I serve on the HGAC board. I'm also on the Transportation Policy Council. And roads, large infrastructure roads, do not know city limits, nor do they know county limits. They don't even know state limits. And so, we have to work together to make them for all of us to work. In my own community, we're east and west, and just like in the region. So if something good or bad happens in the port, that's good or bad for the region. Same thing with the Med Center, same thing for the energy corridor, same thing for far north, far south. If something good happens, it's good for the region. If something bad happens, it's bad for the region. And so we have to think in those terms, that we're all in this together. We have plenty of opportunity to gig our fellow mayors and talk about our individual cities. But at the end of the day, we come together and we're linked, and we need to work together.
Fantastic. Well, and speaking of working together, we have a legislative session not too far out, and all of the interim committee work is starting up or ongoing now, and a lot of activity. We only have a few minutes left, but maybe your top 2, 3, 4 things that you're watching, Mayor, in the upcoming legislative session.
Well, as always, cities play an integral part in people's lives each and every day. I think we say it often that about 70% of your life is affected by the local governments. So your city, your school districts, your counties, and always want to make sure that the legislature is working with us, not against us. And that's always something that's key on our minds. I have no problem working with the legislature to make sure that cities aren't overbearing from a tax standpoint and those types of things. But when they start clipping our ability to do our business local and bring goods and not goods, but services to our community, then we always want to be engaged with our elected officials to help us through that. It's going to be interesting. There's probably going to be, my guess, $30+ billion of additional funds at the state level. Comptroller Hager was in town last week and hinted at a number in that region. And so I think there's going to be a lot of dollars and a lot of discussion on how we spend it. Hence, Grand Parkway and other types of things. If you've got an opportunity for some one-time cash to come in to infuse and do some projects and get them going, now's the time. So it's going to be interesting to see and watch how we get that done. I just want to make sure that the opportunity and the role that the cities play just doesn't get eroded at the state level. Let us be responsible. Let us do our jobs. We have good voters that put us in place, and I'm accountable to them. I have no problem being accountable to a voter. I ask the voters to hold me accountable. And so I just want to make sure that the legislature doesn't erode our ability to do our job.
Absolutely. Well, our final question, and maybe the toughest, and we talked a little bit about this before coming on stage, but the most important question to the mayor: what's your favorite restaurant in the city of Pearland?
So it all depends on what genre you want to eat. And I'll tell you, so if you're hungry for a steak, there's no better steak than Killen's Steakhouse. He's in the top 40 in the country every single year. Ronnie's a great friend, and I would eat there every day if my pocketbook would allow me. But if you're looking for Mexican food, Gringo's, the original is right around the corner from City Hall. None better. If you want Italian, we go to Grazia. I do a lot of meetings at lunchtime at Grazia on our western end of town, and none better than the atmosphere. Great community-minded people. And then there's lots of others in between that do a great job in our community. And we try to stay local, homegrown, away from the chains, if you will, just because those are the guys that sponsor Little League. They sponsor the dance classes. They are there for the community events. They help our fire and police folks when they need it. They're community minded. And so I want to make sure that we promote those community minded folks.
Absolutely. Great recommendations. I've eaten at all three, and they're very involved in the community and the chamber and community in particular, which we're of course very passionate about. Mayor, thank you so much for your time today and for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and to your members, come to Pearland early and often. I know we have folks that live in Pearland that are working for businesses in the Clear Lake area, and so again, we view it as a partner in this region.
Very good. And a few quick closing announcements. First, just big thank you to Mayor Cole for spending a few minutes with us, and to CenterPoint Energy for sponsoring this series. A very brief recap of some of the upcoming events for the Chamber. On May 31st, we have the Chamber's monthly book club getting together. June 1st is the Chamber Young Professional Lunch Bunch. June 9th is the Chamber Business After Hours at WellBe Financial. And June 29th is the Chamber Congressional Forum, where we'll have a number of members of our local congressional delegation. Again, a big thank you to Mayor Cole, and thank you all for joining us today. Have a good afternoon.